Sometimes I like to think back to prior years in my life when I thought differently, maybe was a little more flawed, or at least unaware in how my mind functioned. And I like to think back on some of those times, like some of those topics or concepts that I broke bad on, and just kind of put myself back in that mindset to think about why did I do that? Like, how did I do that? Did I actually believe myself? Right. So, an example. Um, I used to want to believe that I was really good under pressure and under stress, that I was like really calm and handled myself really well, and could play it cool and can kind of figure out the answer, the solution in a tough situation, that type of thing. And if I try and piece together just really quickly, like why was that important to me to have that belief? Um, Probably a combination of like believing in superheroes and believing in kind of like the traits that make somebody special and successful and win ultimately. I was a competitive person. So like Joe Montana, who was my favorite quarterback, he was Joe Cool. He was cool under pressure. Um, You'd watch heroes or good guys on TV, and they could always handle the pressure, and they'd always, beat the bad guy. So I had this kind of idealistic view of that trait, and that was one of those traits that you should be good at, and I should kind of be that type of person. But it's funny because I was not ever that type of person. I would throw tantrums and fits well into my teenage years, maybe beyond, about silly stuff, like video games or sporting events or really whatever it was. And when things got stressed, when I felt tense, I would lose my temper. I would throw stuff and break stuff and all those types of things. So it's such an obvious thing in hindsight, and at the time, I mean, it had to have been that I didn't have a good temperament for those types of things. But I could vividly remember thinking about it and thinking about maybe a situation would happen where at my home or whatever with my wife where I would lose my temper and lose my cool because we were stressed and something was going on, and she would say something to me like you're so bad under pressure, and I remember obviously cliche, that kind of cutting like a knife. But then thinking about it and saying like, no, that's not true. I'm good under pressure. This was a unique circumstance. Or I could think about times at work where I handled pressure really well, and I was kind of building myself back up, that this vision, this belief about myself that I wanted to be true so badly was actually true. And I would convince myself of that, and I would give myself to at least a level of like comfort and satisfaction of like, okay, yeah, no, I am good under pressure. And I did that for a long time. Like I genuinely, I did it long enough to where I can remember starting to, a part of me recognizing the bullshit and being like, hey, I don't think this is true, but I would push that down pretty far, right? I didn't want to really accept that voice or that inconvenient truth, but it started to be there, and started to become more and more obvious. But it was just so important to me that I at least, just for myself, right? And I guess I wanted other people to believe it too, to an extent, my wife, whoever it was, but I needed to know for myself that was true. And, when I think about what was the math behind that at the time, right? What was the benefit I got from telling myself this lie that I was good under pressure when I really wasn't? Because in theory, there's some logic to it. And the first thing that comes to mind is it's the understanding that if I were to admit I'm not good under pressure, right? When I lose my temper, when I break something, when I yell, whatever it is, if I admit that and say, oh wow, I guess that's the proof. I'm really not good under pressure, but I want to be. Well, now there's work to be done. Now you got to fix it. You got to get into the mud. You got to figure out why you're not good under pressure, why it matters that you should be, all that stuff. And it takes a lot of work. And rather than have to do that work, I still want it to be true that I am good under pressure, so I'll just lie to myself. Then I don't have to do the work. I could seemingly feel the benefit, and all is good. And that's kind of the best case scenario in some ways. So I guess I could see that. I could see that calculation playing out. The problem is, as you get older, I think naturally you get a little bit wiser, you get a better perspective. But obviously, you do a lot of the things we talk about in these videos, and that helps really you to question more and not have certainty on things, and to even be more self-aware about your own situation. And I think as that happened, it became obvious what the truth really was. So I could tell myself whatever I wanted, but there was no convincing myself outside of what seemed to be objectively true, that I'm not good under pressure. I could point to numerous examples. I could feel it just in myself when pressure starts to rise, even in small ways or simple situations, that I'm not handling it well. So you can't lie to that anymore. You start to recognize it's going to be true whether I admit it to myself or not. So I might as well just acknowledge it and actually try and do something about it. So again, just an interesting thing to look back on. The other thing I like about it is it helps give me perspective today to say, hey, do I feel that way anywhere else? That same feeling I had about, saying I had a good temperament and I could handle pressure. Does that feeling kick up anywhere else? Is there any other areas I should be digging into now so that it doesn't have to be years later that I look back and recognize it? It helps me in that way as well.